Hello and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We start out in the direction of Bahmut, where the Russians have managed to advance in two directions. First off, in the northern direction, they've managed to gain control of a further forest patch and are fighting within the last one just before the town of Ivanivske. As for the eastern parts, the Russians have managed to gain a foothold here within the town of Ivanivske. The fighting took place in the trenches that the Ukrainians had here to the east of Ivanivske, as we see with this geolocated footage here, where the Russian soldiers stormed these Ukrainian trenches and took control of it. And now this footage here is footage of the Ukrainians launching FPV drones on these Russian positions. So with this, we see that the 98th Guards Air Assault Division is now getting a foothold within Ivanivske and storming the town. So with this information, we see that the Russians are now very close to taking the fighting inside Ivanivske itself, as they have captured the fortifications both to the north and to the east of the town. And with this, the fighting has now reached Ivanivske for the first time since the Wagner forces did so last year in May. This is a significant development because this means that the Russians have now taken the fight to Ivanivske, completely disregarding the battle over Klishivka and Rivka, Bohdanivka and Kalininya, Ruhorivka to the north and to the south of the town. Capturing Ivanivske is pretty much going straight for the final boss to avoid going through these side quests. And if the Russians manage to take control over Ivanivske, they would essentially cut off all supplies to Klishivka and Rivka, Bohdanivka and Ruhorivka, from a close direct supply line. In the south, they would have a few crossings across the canal line, but that's about it. This could be under fire constantly by the Russians, while in the northern section there are some crossings over the canal as well as directions straight from the northern parts going down south. So there are still supply lines, but they are pretty close to the front line and it's difficult to resupply through those roads. In comparison with Ivanivske under Ukrainian control, it is much easier for them to resupply these areas. So with this, we see that the Russians are just going straight for the final boss, as I said. This means that they are trying to, with the capture of Ivanivske, speed up the fighting here to the west of Bahmut. And by isolating and cutting these two areas in two, the Russians could focus on one at a time, allowing them to concentrate a larger portion of their forces in one section and then take down one at a time. They also avoid having to go and brute force their way through it by just going through the central parts, using all of their concentrated forces in one section. And with these developments, we see that the Russians aren't just fighting in one section of the front line, but they're spreading their forces all around the front line, attacking wherever they see is the best opportunity. And with the 98th Guards Air Assault Division, pretty much any target is a doable target. So with this development, we see that the Russians are now fighting here by Ivanivske, and they have advanced both to the north and to the east of the town. Moving further south in the direction of Avdiivka, there's been no developments since the Russians took control over the supply road and split Avdiivka into two. We can see a correlation between the two tactics being used here to the west of Bahmut and in Avdiivka itself. But yeah, we do see a lot of fighting here in the direction of Avdiivka. There's been some reports of fighting here to the northern direction, which I suggested would be the next move for the Russians to cut off or get a better fire control over the final supply road in and out of Avdiivka. And something very interesting is that we have this video here which shows, I'm not sure when this was filmed, this could be a old video, could also be a new one, but this one is a video of a muddy road where a convoy of Ukrainian supply trucks are trying to drive through, but they are stuck in the mud. And this is exactly the sort of road this is here to the west of Avdiivka. We see that at the very corner of the city itself, there are some paved parts of the road, but moving further westwards, we see that it turns into a dirt road. And dirt roads, when there's a lot of rain, turns into muddy roads. So this road here to the west of the Citadel area, west of Avdiivka, is a muddy road. It's not a paved road. So as soon as the rain starts falling, the road itself becomes generally just like we see in the video. This actually means that the Russians have a genuine interest in not taking Avdiivka quickly, because if Syrsky with his command is commanding the Ukrainians to hold the city at all costs, That means he will continue sending reinforcements and supplies through this one road, which will become a muddy road and is the sole supply route in and out of the city. So if the Ukrainians suffer from a lack of supply and difficulty of resupplying and they have to go through a road under Russian fire control that is also muddy, then they become sitting ducks for the Russian army. As such, the Russians would have an interest in not taking the city because leaving the area open for the Ukrainians to resupply and send reinforcements into would allow them to rack up the destruction of the Ukrainian army, which would then dub Avdiivka the new meat grinder. So this is exactly what the Russians are aiming for, and Sirski getting the command of the area and being commander-in-chief makes it that much easier for them to launch this operation. Moving on to Selydove, which I reported on yesterday, there is this significant development, which is that we have now seen footage coming from Selydove. This footage is first off the geolocation of the strikes, which is based on a video that shows the aftermath of the strike. And then we have these two pictures, which just shows the training area here in Selydove and other areas within the town completely destroyed after the Russians claim 1,500 mobilized Ukrainian soldiers were gathered in one place in the town of Selydove. There are different areas in Selydove where these 1,500 soldiers were spread around. They were training camps, they were classrooms and so on, built for the Ukrainian military, and they were used to do a briefing, do some last-minute training before being sent to Avdiivka here in the east. So with this, we see that the Russians struck this for multiple hours with cluster munitions and also launched, according to Ryber, 5 Iskander missiles on the town. So this means that they really pulled no strings. They put everything they had into demolishing this town to hit this concentration of Ukrainian soldiers in it. Moving here in the direction of Marinka, there is also this development where the Russians have made this small advancements to the west of the city. We see they've managed to capture this road extension here. And with this, the Russians are moving to gain further control over the road here to the south of Marinka and trying to expand this sort of control in the direction of Avdiivka. If the Russians manage to gain full control over this road here, then they'll be able to easier resupply in the direction of the main road coming out of Marinka, and also have multiple roads to make use of that are paved. The thing is, we are now on the 14th of February. We're getting closer and closer to the end of winter. And as the spring begins, there's going to be a lot more rain. The temperatures are going to be in the positives and all the roads are going to become muddy again. That is Ukraine in a nutshell. The weather in Ukraine, the geography of Ukraine does not allow for huge military operations unless they are using paved roads. So this is why it's so important for the Russians to hold control over these paved roads to allow them to resupply and supply the soldiers going through the fighting at the front lines. They also need to allow them to use their armored vehicles and so on. This is why it's important for the Russians to use their main force in Avdiivka soon, because soon enough they'll not be able to properly resupply unless they have full control of paved roads here to the east of the city. And as we can see here, these are all dirt roads. The only paved roads go through the Dacia area, which is fairly close to the front line, and even these are hardly that well prepared. The main roads would be here to the south of the city and to the north of the city, which the Russians do not have proper control of. So while they can, they should get as much supplies and equipment into the city before the spring hits. But this also raises the question, while it may be in the interest of the Russians to extend the Battle of Avdiivka, is it really possible for them to do so? Is there any main supply routes that they can use to resupply their forces? Or are they going to end up with a difficult supply situation just like the Ukrainians have? Despite their control over the eastern and southern parts, they do not have any clear supply routes in and out. The Russians would at the very least need to gain control over the main highway here to the east of Kamyanka, or east of Avdiivka by Kamyanka, to allow them to resupply through the roads here to the east. But this would also mean that the Russians would need significant advances here to the east of Avdiivka. They could use the road here going through the north of Kamyanka towards Krasnoarivka. There are some paved roads there, and then from there go down to the Dacia area, move through it. This would be fairly safe, but it will also be difficult as the roads cannot be used too much. The biggest issue for creating these very muddy roads is not that the rain comes and the degrees are in the positive, but that vehicles use the same roads over and over again. That means that the Russians would need a myriad amount of roads as long as the roads aren't properly paved. Therefore, the Russians will need multiple supply routes in and out of the city if they want to resupply it continuously over multiple months, where the weather is, Ukrainian weather. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.